Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Truth Be Told. After a extended vacation, a chance for us to recharge and to replay some of the older episodes that people haven't heard. We've come back, and we are ready to give you some of the best news in the Christian world and in the secular world and all the kind of issues that affect us. And my co-host is the wonderful Army Girl for Christ. Welcome back.
Well, hello.
It's been a long time since we've done this. Let's get this music going here.
Yeah, that helps. So, yes, it's been a nice vacation. We've been able to kind of recharge and regroup and share some of our older shows. So, yeah, it's been really nice, and we're glad that we're back. We're glad everyone's joining us, and we thank you for your support. We thank you for being here. And
absolutely.
Even our archive listeners.
For sure. And we want to say a very special thanks to Chris White over at Revelations Radio Network, who added Truth Be Told there and opened up a whole new listener base. So welcome to all our new listeners. We appreciate you guys tuning in. It's definitely been a blessing.
Amen.
All right, and we are broadcasting live at the moment on blogtalkradio.com/grok558. If you're listening and you're not in our chat room, it is open. Come on in and join us, and you'll be able to interact with us as well as ask questions of our guest. And Army Girl, you want to talk a little about who our guest is tonight?
Yes, we're really excited tonight. We have William Ramsey on as guest tonight, our honored guest. And he has written extensively on the occult in Hollywood. He's also done works, The Prophet of Evil, an extensive work on Aleister Crowley, which is very good, and also has done some work in a book on the, I believe it's called the Memphis 3. You'll have to tell us about that, but the murders that happened in West Memphis a few years back had some occult connections. So he's done a lot of research in many areas, and we're just really glad he can come and share this because, it's really important, and I think especially for parents, for all of us as adults as well, but especially parents to understand what's going on in the media and the dark side of it. And it's not coincidental. And we'll be really anxious to hear some of the details of this because, we need to not be ignorant of the devil's schemes. And we need to expose darkness but have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but we're also supposed to expose them so that we can have the knowledge to combat it and stand against it.
Absolutely. And we should get all of the legal, or should I say the jargon for the legalistic that listen to us. We should get all of this stuff out of the way. So the comments and beliefs of Army Girl, Rock, and our guest are not necessarily those of CYIWorldwide.com. All right. And tonight's show is not a endorsement of occult, because we are obviously born-again Christians, but it is, like Army Girl said, to expose the works of darkness so that we can be aware of what goes on around us and have nothing to do with them. Okay, now that we got all that crap out of the way, before we bring our guest on, as we always do, we're going to start off with a cool song, and we're going to start out with a song by Reckless Mercy. They're called Turning Over Tables, and you can find out more about them on our website. We'll be right back. All right, and we're back. That song was, again, Reckless Mercy, Turning Over Tables. It's available on iTunes, or you can find out more about their links in the band at CYIWorldwide.com. A little different than what we usually play, but that's because of you, Army Girl. You said, no hip-hop, no punk. I only like Chris Tomlin.
Not quite, but A little bit in the middle.
I got a punk song for later for you, though.
Oh, boy.
Okay, but anyway, people don't want to hear us rattle on. So,
yes.
Why don't we bring on our host? Welcome to Truth Be Told, William Ramsey.
Great. Thank you very much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
It is our pleasure. We've been very excited about this. So, you've written extensively on Crowley and done videos and documentaries on Aleister Crowley, kind of occult connections behind the reality that we see and that most people don't think about. Can we start off with you giving what the definition of occult is?
Yeah, I just kind of refer to occult as kind of like not revealed or not easily apprehended or understood. I think that would be the kind of Merriam-Webster dictionary definition. So I think that it doesn't necessarily mean Satanism or devil worship flat out, but it's kind of things that are hidden that aren't seen. And for me, it took me kind of a while to wake up and realize that there are hidden signs, symbols, and signals and that are put out there by people who are involved in occultism or Satanism. And, a lot of my work pretty much tries to reveal those hidden symbols that are really in our faces in political speech and in Hollywood movies and, in historical events.
Now, some people will say, if you talk to most people, even most average Christians, and you start to talk about these things that are hidden because they're, most people don't notice them, so they're very well hidden, and you start talking about, Hollywood and how Hollywood can be dangerous and how the media is dangerous to, us personally, spiritually, and our society's values, most people will say, oh, that doesn't affect anything. What's the importance of talking about this?
Well, I think it's about revealing that not only are these things being shared among people who are interested, but it just shows and proves with evidence and facts that there is a satanic or, occult underground that exists and has existed in our society for at least a century. And, you can tell just through all of the use of these these kind of secret codes like the numerical codes, etc., that not only has it been extant, but it's actually growing in its impact in our common culture. And, I think they're definitely having a secret agenda. So, and if you're not part of it, it's important to understand that agenda. I think it's vitally important, especially as Christians, to get an understanding that the actions and things that are taking place in our society and our culture today are not at random. They're actually intentional, and they're being done by human beings who want these changes that I believe are evil to take place.
Now, what are some of the more blatant things that you can point out that the average person who doesn't want to do too much research because they're lazy, something that they could say, oh, wow, that is true?
Well, I think that, particularly you want to find out, like Crowley himself was probably the arch-Satanist of the modern era. He was born in 1875 in England, died in 1947, also in Hastings, England, southern England. But he spent all of his whole life, and he came from money, he spent his life really expanding the, understanding of the occult. He became a scholar of the occult and wrote multiple books. But not only was that, he was very active in networking and being in secret societies. And it's important to see what his effects were. But he really wanted to subvert and destroy Christianity. He said it multiple times. And his followers are of that same vein. And so it's important to understand what he thought and how his kind of symbols and what he wanted, were represented in these numbers and symbols. And, a lot of them, his primary number is 11. So that, you see around a lot. Also 93, 77. These are important numbers that aren't mere numbers. They represent meaning for him. 93 represents Thelema and Agape, which are will and love. And, for a practitioner of sorcery, the privacy of that individual's will is very important. And you see that in, it even goes back into the Old Testament about Satan saying, I will ascend to heaven. The 5 I wills, I think it's from What book of the Bible was that? Here, Isaiah. Thank you. So you see that will, and it's Hitler had his own like triumph of the will. Crowley had his Thelema, which in the Kabbalah is a way to give words a numerical value. And Thelema and agape both have the value of 93 in the Kabbalah. So, you see that around. It's important to see these in these movies and et cetera, like they pop up all over the place, and you kind of see it like in Oliver Stone's World Trade Center. You see the hats of the guys have the 93, and there's Flight 93 on the events of 9/11. Like my original book is Prophet of Evil, which I attempted to, and I think I proved that there's some kind of correlation between Aleister Crowley and the events of 9/11. There were so many references to his ideas in that event, with the use of even September 11th, the date of the event. There was Flight 11th was the first flight that hit the towers. There's Flight 93, 77. So by seeing these, you can kind of get an idea of, the influence of Crowley, and also that other people are picking up on Crowley, like Kubrick, Oliver Stone, Polanski, these people who, ostensibly on the surface are mere directors, but they're more than that. They're really putting their opinions out there and influencing society with these works of art. So get back to your original question. I think that understanding the numerical aspects of Crowley's system and how important they were is vital, and those numbers would be 11, 93, and 77.
So, for instance, if me and my friends had a symbol that, we kind of used for our club or something, and I stuck it in every movie as like a symbol to them, saying, giving them a shout-out, is that kind of what they're doing?
Yes, I think so. I think that they definitely have their symbols and meanings, and they put them in there. And it's just like maybe any other type of gang, whether it's, the Crips or the Bloods have their own hand gestures, their own numbers, their own drawings, things that reference their own thing. Well, I would say the Occult Underground has its own as well. And they all respect Crowley. And, there are definitely different variants and people who've grown off Crowley. But they really, it's just amazing for me. I didn't really know much about Crowley until I really started researching him. Mm-hmm. But it was amazing how many people really go back to him, like how many followers there are.
And most people will probably recognize who he is from the Sgt. Pepper album by the Beatles, of their most admired people. He's in the crowd of the people. He has the shaved head, and, I think when most people, they don't really know who he is, but when they see that picture, they're like, oh, yeah, that's that guy. And I think most people don't. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and there's some people have made the argument that Sgt. Pepper is Crowley, because Sgt. Pepper says Sgt. Pepper 20 years ago today, Sgt. Pepper taught the band to play, and the album came out in '67, and Crowley died in '47. So there is something to be said about that, and these guys, both McCartney and Lennon, have referenced a lot of Crowley's themes. So Lennon, in his last interview with Playboy magazine, said, the whole thing about the Beatles was about doing what you want. And that's just kind of a paraphrasing of Crowley's famous 11-word axiom, which is, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Mm-hmm. So, and that was what he really tried to evangelize to the world, is human liberty, this concept of human liberty, and kind of this godhood that even goes back to the Old Testament, Genesis, devil in the Garden of Eden saying, ye shall be as gods.
Right,
but the Beatles, and also Paul McCartney said, everything about the Beatles had to do with magic. Well, when that came out, he said use the word magic with a K. Like, he specifically emphasized the K, and that's the way Crowley spelled it. He actually borrowed it from the kind of Middle Ages sorcerers, but the K was very important to Crowley as a kind of differentiator from kind of rabbit in the hat type magicians. But a K is also the 11th letter in the English alphabet. So the K is another important symbol in addition to, the numbers 11, 93, and 77 that people should keep an eye out, and that the use of the letter K in all these kind of cultural figures is very interesting. For example, the writer of Harry Potter, J.K. Rowling, she actually gave her middle name the letter K. She changed it later after people kind of got wise to her, but when she first wrote her book, that K didn't represent like a middle name. She just used the initial K.
Well, isn't that convenient? It's kind of disappointing to hear about the Beatles. I've heard a lot of that, but I didn't realize, I didn't want to realize that Paul McCartney held those views because he's my, singing inspiration. So that kind of sucks.
Yeah, I mean, it's really kind of sad. I mean, it's easy for us to kind of look back at them, at least for me, as kind of tame, but back then they were very revolutionary. Their ideas, and there were a lot of changes that they were used. To make changes in society, probably the most effective way is through the use of music, because it's really just pleasant to listen to, any music. So I think that the people who really wanted to foment revolutionary change in the 60s wrote a lot of music that was good. I mean, I'm conflicted too, because I like the music. I like the Beatles. I like listening to Led Zeppelin. I've listened to Led Zeppelin, which is another satanic band influenced by Crowley. But it's interesting how they're able to put these messages in these songs that really did create change. And the Beatles brought in, Sgt. Pepper brought in all this drug culture that didn't exist before '67.
Right.
And that's really one of what Crowley's kind of ideas was to illuminate the world. And his idea of illumination was that kind of same thing, through this New Age-ism, the occultism, the drug use, and Crowley did live that type of lifestyle. He's essentially a heroin junkie for the last 30 years of his life.
And that whole concept of do whatever you want, I mean, that's permeated our culture, especially in the 80s. That was, slogans for things. Do what you want, as long as you don't hurt anyone, and all of these things. And it's become ingrained in us. A lot of these satanic values have become so ingrained in our society. Treat others how they treat you. I mean, all these backward twisting of the scriptures has become commonplace.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's pretty surprising how effective they've been at instilling their own alternate values, and it's come from a multi-tiered approach. There's been it's come through culture, through Hollywood, through gurus like Timothy Leary, even as much as Scientologists like L. Ron Hubbard was a Crowley follower, and if you look at what his religion does, it's almost like a New Age religion. It is a New Age religion, really. They teach that you can have power over matter, energy, space, and time, or mess. But it's also there's a subtext in that whole religion about doing what you want.
Right.
There really aren't so many. I mean, you have to obey L. Ron Hubbard and his thing and pay tons of money to supposedly go up the bridge to higher learning or whatever. But there's a lot of so-called this kind of satanic idea of freedom.
Well, and that was prevalent in the 80s. You couldn't watch TV without seeing a commercial for Dianetics, and it was sold as like a self-improvement thing.
Right.
And it got a lot of people wrapped up, and all it was Satanism with a different face. Human potential and this fake spiritual kind of thing.
Yep, I can't agree with you more. I mean, it really is, and even the son of L. Ron Hubbard has said in multiple venues that he was essentially a black magician, that he really didn't care about his followers, that he had his mantra as far people as my slaves, which is very similar to Crowley's thing, which is statement, which is the slave shall serve. Crowley believed in his ideal society was a feudal society. With a very intelligent elite ruling over a mass of, zombies or slaves, and that was kind of the model for Scientology. I mean, L. Ron Hubbard was the false messiah, bald-faced false messiah who was the center of the whole thing. They actually in Scientology they call him Source.
Mm.
And so like I mean, it's just a wolf in sheep's clothing, and you know, there's a tie into Hollywood there because L. Ron Hubbard knew that the popularity of Scientology would grow in proportion to how many celebrities he could get on board. So they were always eagerly trying to recruit celebrities, Hollywood celebrities. And there's even a Hollywood Celebrity Center that's, ornate. It's just this beautiful palatial palace right near, I think Sunset Strip or somewhere in Hollywood. And, all these celebrities, or Tom Cruise, for example, is treated like a demigod by Scientology because he's brought so much attention to it. But it's a really vicious, evil cult.
Well, and what's funny about it is that people are following a man who was a science fiction writer. That right there would be enough for me to say, yeah, I'm not going to try that one out.
Yeah,
what?
I mean, it's pretty bad. L. Ron Hubbard had two boats. One was called Apollo. The other was called the Magician. So you have the occultism there. He was a member of the Agape Lodge, which Jack Parsons was involved in Pasadena. So, before he started his religion, he had his kind of occult, ticket was already stamped, or, he was a full-fledged member. And, it's just really sad that people get involved in all that.
And the insidious thing is that it's so sneaky. I mean, even if you look at Star Trek, even the ones post-Gene Roddenberry, it's just littered with references to let's eliminate religion and then the human race will rise up and do these amazing things. And, I mean, all over the Star Trek franchise, there's just tons of themes about one world government and no God and human potential. I mean, it's crazy, and you don't, until you really look for it, you just don't see it.
Yeah, it's amazing, and I heard Roddenberry was a real high-level Mason, my 33rd degree.
Yeah, he was, and he was into some occult practices. Go figure, these are the people that rise to the top, huh?
Well, it's a good point, because here's the thing, is that it goes back to Hollywood. You're in a passive environment, you're getting this, you're watching a story, but you're also getting a little subtle programming there, about some doctrines that they want you to believe.
Oh,
well, I'm glad you brought that up, because I was just thinking, Jesus used stories and parables in the Old Testament to make points, spiritual points to the average people, that so they could understand the principles. And Satan does everything counterfeit to what God does. So these stories and this drama, I think it's kind of interesting that all of these people that are out in Hollywood have connections going back to Crowley. And you see, it's like a big web. Somebody knows somebody that's connected to somebody, and it's between the movie producers are, by their own words, very, they seem to know what they're doing to change society. They're very well aware of the messages that they want to put out there, and they're very intelligent people. All of these people, are not dumb people, but it seems like everything is about carnality. Everything is against certainly the God of the Bible and anything to do with the God that we believe in, right from taking the Lord's name in vain as a swear word in so many movies, and just everything that is what we consider the moral compass and code from the Bible, they go against it.
Right. Yeah. You make a great point. The connections to Hollywood and Crowley are pretty amazing, and they're actually still relevant and recent. For example, James Franco just spoke at the inauguration of Obama. Well, James Franco was right out here in Venice, L.A. I live in L.A., and he was involved in a public working of the Rite of Bartzabel, which was something done by Jack Parsons. And Parsons was a follower of Crowley. And there's a picture of Franco sitting in between, right next to Crowley's follower, Kenneth Anger. So he's hanging out with Kenneth Anger, a stone-cold, apex, top-notch follower of Crowley, and then hanging out with Obama. So, this is still a relevant subject and issue. It's not something that happened in the past. It's still happening and ongoing now.
That's really not surprising to me because Kenneth Anger was closely associated with Alfred Kinsey, who was a total, he did some work in the University of Indiana, I think it was, and back in the 40s, and basically blew the lid off of what we consider sexual norms in our society. And his findings, which weren't scientific, are still used today, even in court, and he's given credible credit for that. But it was just a bunch of perversion and wasn't scientific at all. But
right, yeah, they just made up. And it was with Rockefeller money, too, is my understanding.
Mm-hmm. Right, and as well with the feminist movement, a lot of this stuff is around sexual perversion and stuff. So it doesn't surprise me since our president has come out and supported gay marriage. He's supported abortion and problems. I mean, promiscuity has been promoted as a good thing, and then all the sexual freedom. And with the children, I mean, even, an unwanted pregnancy, our president said, I don't want my children, if they have an unwanted pregnancy, to be burdened with an unwanted baby, And, it's for the murder of the unborn. So I just feel like a lot of these people are connected, but it's very dark. And I don't think the average American going to the movies, realizes the impact of visual. We've got audio, surround sound around us. We're in a dark room. We're vulnerable. And here comes all of this at us, violence, perversion, and basically Antichrist and occult doctrines are being fed in and programmed to people as they're watching this. And they seem to know this by their own words. The producers and the directors seem to understand exactly what they're doing.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%.
Well, we're going to take a quick break. We're at the half-hour mark. So we will be back in 2 minutes with our guest, William Ramsey.
All right. We're back. You're listening to Truth Be Told on Glock Radio. And with us tonight, we've been speaking with our guest, William Ramsey, who's an author and researcher on the occult. And I was going to give out the call-in number in case anyone wants to call in with questions for William. It's 714-242-5180. 714-242-5180. And if you'd like to speak with us, press 1 on your keypad and we'll know that you want to come on the air. So, William, I was thinking about when do you think this really started getting involved with the movies? I know there was a lot of, it seemed like a cult explosion in the 60s with Leary and stuff. Can you kind of give us an idea of what was going on in the 60s there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that really was where it grew. I mean, I think that the changes in our society in the 60s brought in a lot of different occultists. Kenneth Anger was always lurking around. There were some movies from Dennis Wheatley, who was a follower of Crowley. Dennis Wheatley was kind of he was the Stephen King of his era in the 50s and 60s. He wrote very, very popular occult books, and there was a couple movies from him, The Devil Rides Out and To the Devil a Daughter. They're all, there used to be these, there's been a strain of these kind of occult supernatural thrillers that were very popular starting in the 60s. And so, I think that's when that they kind of grew. I think as far as the overt occultism and stuff that was put in is really kind of done by the directors, specific directors. And in my movie, I kind of emphasize about 3 or 4: Kubrick, Stone, Polanski, And those guys pretty much every one of their movies they have some kind of reference to Crowley or occultism.
Now, what a Polanski? He's an interesting one because his wife was murdered by I just forgot
Manson.
his name. Right, Manson. What was that? Couldn't have been a coincidence. There was a reason Manson had targeted them. Can you talk a little about Polanski, some of the movies he's done, and some themes that are contained in those movies?
Yeah, I think that one of his more famous films is Rosemary's Baby. That was the film where the couple goes into the Dakota, which is an actual real hotel in New York City where John Lennon stayed with Yoko Ono, as a matter of fact. But then she ended up having the devil's baby. Apparently, Anton LaVey, who was the head of the Church of Satan, played the devil and was an advisor on the film. There's also some interesting references to Alfred Kinsey in that film. There's a part where the main character, played by Cassavetes, handles a book from Alfred Kinsey. So it's almost kind of like a wink and a nod to a guy, Kinsey, who knew Crowley, hung out with Anger. Both he and Anger, I don't know if you guys know this, but they visited Crowley's magical hideaway that was located on the island of Cefalù in Sicily, in Italy. And so there's a picture, a somewhat famous picture of them together at that, researching and looking at Crowley's kind of magical hideaway. Anyway, so Polanski, it's pretty interesting. Polanski's done a lot of films that, involve occultism. The other is Ninth Gate, featuring Johnny Depp. And Johnny Depp is a pretty hardcore occultist. I didn't really know that until recently, but he also ties into my most recent book, which is about Abomination. It's about the West Memphis 3 murders. But they were found guilty in '93, but due to the pressure and the funds supplied by Hollywood occultists and just people who believe this story, this guy who's convicted of murdering 3 children, or 3 guys who were convicted of murdering 3 8-year-old children in '93 were let out of jail. And one of the central characters is heavily involved and interested in Crowley, which is how the whole case came to my attention. But anyway, Depp was one of the bankrollers, and they bankrolled their release. Yeah, they bankrolled their funds for the use of public relations and attorneys to the tune of about $10 to $20 million.
Wow.
So it was, it's an incredible amount of money. And this guy, you can go to my blog, which is occult911.wordpress.com, and take a look at some of the documents I put up. It's amazing what really happened. It's just, I call it an abomination because it's something from the Old Testament. Like, if you let somebody out into your society who's found guilty, he was literally found guilty twice of killing 3 8-year-old kids, and in the most heinous, vile way. And there's all kinds of occultism involved in it, and it's intergenerational. It's really just a horror story. And the guy ended up moving to Salem in the site of the old witch trial, Salem, Massachusetts, because he thought it would be safer there. But anyway, Polanski. I'm sorry?
I was going to say, I actually saw him talking. I think he went on The View or one of the talk shows, and was acting very innocent, and everybody was applauding that he was found not guilty, that he was falsely charged, and that he was released. And I'm just shaking my head. He's acting like he's got halo over his head, like he's this little angel that was falsely accused and just didn't understand, what happened.
All right. Did you see the tattoos up and down his arms?
Yeah, that was creepy.
Did you notice that he was making the occult sign of silence during the interviews? He kept putting his finger up to his lips. He was making satanic secret signs right there, right in the midst of like 1 million people, right in the front of all those other people. And I just was like, I almost projectile vomited. I mean, it was amazing. Yeah, he's a really dark, evil character. I mean, you can go to my blog and read those documents about the doctrine of silence. It goes all the way back into prehistory, but it's an important component of all occultism, and that component is to be quiet. That's why it's kind of hard to figure out what these people are up to. But he's very. It's an incredible story. It's just so amazing that they got this guy out of jail, and they're out there telling people that he's innocent. So he's just like lying, pathologically lying in front of all these people. At law, Army Girl, at law, he's guilty. So, I mean, if he applies for a job, he has to write out felon, capital murder, guilty, murdering 3 people.
Wow.
How they got him out of jail, I mean, it's just a long saga that's 20 years old, but the involvement of this corrupt Hollywood elite in this case was instrumental in swaying public opinion. What they did is they convinced the public that they were innocent, outside of and that they used that as leverage against this Arkansas judiciary, and eventually they just caved. And it's incredibly irresponsible. I mean, to believe this guy's innocent, you have to believe that a jury unanimously voted wrong, that during the appeal process to the State Supreme Court of Arkansas, they got it wrong. And then his attorneys even appealed his conviction to the Supreme Court of the United States, which denied what's called a writ of certiorari, which is, they'll grant a writ of certiorari if they think that there's something, worth their while. So the fact that they did not grant it gives an indication that they didn't find anything unjust or untoward about the decisions in the lower courts. So you have to believe that, all these people got it wrong, and it's an incredible. We can do a whole other conversation on that book and about Crowley. Crowley came up in the trial. The original movies, there were these movies that came out that the first one I didn't think was too biased, but the second and third were very questionable. They really created some doubt as to who the guilty parties were. But the original one talked about Crowley. This guy had the main central character is a guy. His born name was Michael Wayne Hutchinson, but he changed it to Damien, which is a real popular name change in the occult for some reason. I love the name Damien. So he goes by Damien Eccles, and he had a Crowley obsession, and that's really how this whole thing caught my eye. And a lot of people didn't get into the occult elements of the crime or the personalities involved. They just looked at it as a murder case. But when I started researching and reading it and looking at the original court cases, these guys were heavily involved in witchcraft, and they still are.
Crazy.
It's really amazing.
Wow. Well, it had to be something for Hollywood to get involved like they did. There has to be some huge connection there because, I mean, why them? Why would they choose to support, any of that if it wasn't in the dark? And this silence, everything is in the dark. It's secret. It's hidden. It's, and this is how you know that it's satanic because everything is in the dark and,
and it's manipulative.
Well said. Yeah, I mean, they're dark. Their acts are evil, so they keep them secret, and it's that's this whole concept of silence, and this concept of silence is interspersed in almost every occult society out there. Whether it's the Masons who take 33 oaths of secrecy, Skull and Bones, OTO, all these different organizations are all about silence. Theosophy.
Yeah.
Now, another director you mentioned in your notes and in the books was Oliver Stone, who's probably one of the most prolific ones on the list. Can you talk about where he gets his ideas and some of the occult themes in his movies?
Yeah, well, I was surprised. I didn't know that Stone was a knowledgeable occultist. So, I mean, that is another element about how, he'll never externalize his understanding, but through his movies, it's just there. I mean, it's really shocking. Like the movies that I referenced, The Doors, for example, was about Jim Morrison and the band The Doors, who Morrison was essentially kind of a shaman / witch. His wife was a girl by the name of Patricia Keneally. She's actually featured in the film doing a hand-fasting witchcraft Wicca ceremony.
Wow.
That she's never referenced, but she's there. So that's her doing this ceremony, his ex-wife. And if you want to see witchcraft being done, right in front of your face, that movie has it. So, and there's all this stuff about drinking blood. These people like to drink blood. It's hard to believe, but they do. And, just like it goes back into the Old Testament, the life is in the blood.
Mm-hmm.
And and then there's Jim Morrison's Peace Frog song that talks about blood in the streets on the town of New Haven, which is where Skull and Bones is. Blood in the streets in the streets of Venice, which is where Morrison lived. Anyway, so you see the Doors. There's there's a death and devil figure that is through there, and there's also the peace sign, which is an exoteric kind of play. The peace sign is the 2 fingers up, 3 fingers down. That's a 23, which is part of in the occult. It's the 23 enigma, and 2/3 of 1 is 666.
Oh, so, wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now,
so there's a different meaning.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to continue. I mean, Natural Born Killers, which is a movie that people have, unfortunately, impressionable youngsters have emulated and actually gone on these killing sprees, just like the movie. Starts out with a 77. There's a little TV there, and it says 77 Sunset Strip. So, and 77 in Anton Szandor LaVey's Devil's, what is it? Not the Devil's Bible, Devil's Handbook or Satan's Manual. I forgot the name of the book, but there's 77 names of Lucifer. So, and 77 is a very important number to Crowley. 77 represents 11 times 7, and 7 is like the perfected man. There are 7 steps in the perfected man, so 77. And if you ever look at the Seal of Babylon, which is kind of Crowley's seal, there's 77s all around. And 666 is in the intro to Natural Born Killers. So Stone knows a lot more than people ask him questions about, or he puts out to the public, and it's there just by these numerical reference. A director is a very powerful person. They dictate what's in the screen, what's in the screenshot. So, I tend to think that these things are not at random. They're there intentionally, especially when they're put in, intros or times during the course of the film where things are slowing down. So, he wrenches Prometheus and Alexander. The movie Alexander, Prometheus is a symbol of Satan to all Satan followers, because he stole fire from heaven and gave it to man, and that's supposedly what Satan does, is give knowledge to man. And then, so if you see Prometheus, just like when you go to Rockefeller Center, at the very center of Rockefeller Center is a gilded Prometheus statue. That's a representation of Satan, and they show it in the background at almost every presidential election I've seen for the last 20 years. Behind NBC or CBS, they show the Prometheus in the background. I mean, it's just straight up showing you who really runs the show.
Right.
So you can see the Democrat or Republican, that doesn't matter. Every one of our presidents probably in the last 30 years has been a Luciferian, and it probably goes back even farther than that.
Well, I thought it's really curious that, Oliver Stone did a movie on the Doors, and that he has an occult connection, because Jim Morrison, was heavily influenced by the occult. He thought that, and he mentions it in the song Peace Frog, which you talked about, that when he saw these dead Indians on the road, and he felt like their spirits had jumped into his. So he even admitted that he had some kind of possession. And it shows up throughout a lot of his songs, those themes. So it's interesting that of all people, he would choose him to do a movie on.
Yeah, it is interesting. So, and he's a Yalie, so there's always this kind of correlation between people who go to Yale, I don't know what it is, and the occult. And they're all very intelligent, but they also have a very diverse background to say, I guess not a lot of, there's just a lot of occultism people come out of Yale, so many secret societies, etc. Skull and Bones is just for the heap. There's about another 10 or 20 secret groups that have their own secret libraries and stuff like that. I was surprised. I've been into, I won't explain how, but I've seen some of the Theosophical buildings and their libraries, and I was like shocked at how vast their internal libraries are. I was like, wow, books that are not on the internet.
Wow.
Now, with these producers, are any of them out with their spiritual beliefs? I know Kubrick was kind of screwed up, but Oliver Stone you don't really think about being in any kind of a cult. He presents very well.
Yeah, you would never know except what he has left interspersed. He's a very intelligent guy. He has very broad interests, so it's not surprising that he's been exposed. But, and I've heard some of in his associates and what he does at his off time, and I'm not surprised. But, there's some pretty open producers and stuff like that. Roland Emmerich is just, he says 9/11 all the time, which is a huge number for Satanists. Even the number 9/11 is important. That's, so Crowley lived from 1875 to 1947. One of his followers is Gerald Brousseau Gardner, and he started Wicca out of whole cloth. Wicca, the whole Wiccan religion, it claims to go back into prehistory, but in reality, it was systematized and put together by Gerald Brousseau Gardner, who has his OTO. He got something from Crowley. He bought an OTO charter from Crowley, and he met Crowley. And that's in my new book, Abomination. I trace the occult kind of roots of the modern era from Crowley to Brousseau and to the Wiccan follower, Raymond Buckland. But anyway, Brousseau, he was a sorcerer. There's no other way to put it. And what he did is created these circles, and the dimensions of those circles are 9 feet and 11. So there'd be an internal circle of 9 feet and an external circle of 11, and between those two circles they put holy words. And he would say that when you're in that circle, you're in the kingdom or realm of the gods, capital G, which I think to a Christian is, the fallen angel,
Right.
You're in a pit of hell where demons and stuff exist. So Gardner is a real monster. But that's just a 9/11 right there. Anyway, Roland Emmerich, and the other one is Jerry Bruckheimer, who's also, he exposes people. Yeah, Bruckheimer. Oh, he exposes people to one of the hardest, hardcore satanic symbols on any show that Bruckheimer does. There's a road that you follow down the road, and then you see a tree on the right, and the lightning hits that tree. Do you remember that symbol?
Yeah.
That is like a brutally satanic symbol. That is the lightning bolt of Satan who fell from heaven and gives the tree its knowledge. So instead of the fruit of the good and evil, it's a perversion of the Genesis story, where Satan gives you his knowledge. So it's a representation. It's also been used by this other guy who's involved in this. I was shocked when I saw it. He was involved in the UFO disclosure. I think his name is Green or something like that, but he uses that symbol.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, people, look at the symbol. He's lying. This is like Luciferianism. And Luciferianism is the concept, I think, that, there's Satanism, Luciferianism, all kind of, there's some semantic differences. But I think the Luciferian concept is that, Lucifer is actually the good guy who's giving humanity his knowledge and teaching him how to live, and that God has, rejected people and kicked them out of Eden and stuff like that.
Right, God's the tyrant and Satan's the liberator.
Right. You're right, exactly, that nonsense.
Well, yeah, because Satan appeals to the flesh, and it seems like they want the carnality, they want, all the pleasures of the flesh, and to not have any kind of restriction, and to be rebellious in that attitude. So, that's all the things that Satan feeds fallen man.
Right.
It's,
absolutely.
Pretty attractive.
So why put these symbols in there? Why put all these little things if people don't know what they are? Because most people see the lightning strike the tree and all that and be like, whatever. Or when, someone sings about the crossroads, and they have this in many music videos with the crossroads.
Right.
Most people don't get anything out of that. So why even put that stuff in there?
Well, I think it's a signal to other followers, and also it's an indicator that, they're the keeper of the symbols and understanding, and you're an outsider, and it's maybe it's a little bit of a power trip, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Like we're the stupid sheep. It's kind of a joke, it seems like.
Yeah, it's kind of like mocking the dumb Christians and all that other stuff. They don't know what we think, and it's a different way of communicating in language and stuff like that. I guess that's my guess. I don't know. I don't know why they.
Another thing I was thinking of with that is there's a lot of repetition. When we're talking about this, we see so much, so like you think of Harry Potter with the lightning bolt. Everywhere there's lightning bolts. Everywhere there's the all-seeing eye of Horus. There's, it's blatantly out there, and we see it over and over and over, so that we're very familiar, even if it's just a subconscious thing of, seeing these symbols over and over. And so it's almost like we're comfortable with them. I mean, if anybody wanted to go out and pursue this, they would be very familiar with a lot of their language and their symbols just because they've seen them so many times.
Right, and I think that's true, but there's also like false interpretations, false understandings out there. There's an internal understanding and there's an external. There's some pretty sophisticated rationales. Like I've heard people, like for me, the all-seeing eye and the pyramid on the back of a dollar bill is about as evil a symbol as you can get. But the illumined people tell the public, oh yeah, this represents, the building of our country and this great endeavor, and they tell the public all this so they don't think it's that sinister, but it's really, really sinister. The real internal meaning of that seal, So I think that there's an interpretation for the public and there's an interpretation for the initiates.
Mm-hmm. Do you think they use that like as a signature as well, kind of like a stamp on their work?
I would say, I mean, I think, they I don't know. Some of these people are very serious. They're very serious Satan followers. I mean, they devoted their life to the cause, and they carry that torch. So.
Well, I had a question. I was wondering about people like, you think about Alfred Hitchcock and Vincent Price, those old movies where a lot of witchcraft and such. Were they also into things like this? I mean, Alfred Hitchcock was from England, I think, but was he ever involved with Crowley?
I never made that connection. So I would love to study him. I mean, even the stuff I've studied, it's like a topical level. I mean, these people, like, there could be a lot more out there, though. That's one of the problems is that their fellowship and following is secret, so you have to really kind of look for clues. And, some of them you would never know. But, there was a guy who... I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, there was a guy, like, for example, his name was Tom Dryburgh. He was essentially like the Tip O'Neill of England. He was this guy who was at the top of the Labour Party in England. Excuse me. He was at the top of the Labour Party in England for like 40 or 50 years. And... he was all kinds of trouble. He'd hang out with criminals, and he was up to no good. And nobody really knew he was a Crowley follower after, and then at the end of his life, he admitted that there was enough evidence and stuff like that he had signed an oath to Crowley saying that I will follow all of your doctrines and do what thou will. And that Crowley's executor actually found it in the document. So you had this huge political figure that everybody in England knows, who was a stone-cold Crowley follower.
Wow. And it seems like some of these figures were very smart. Like you take him, Blavatsky, Kinsey. They were really kind of smart about how they did things, and they really worked hard to not be fringe and crazy like, a real Satan. You would think a real Satanist is,
Right.
They were pretty... the intelligence, for one thing, like Kinsey. I've worked for 6 years as a therapist working with sexual issues, and Kinsey was the textbook for a lot of therapies for working with people with sex issues. And as I started looking into Kinsey, I was like, whoa, this stuff is really crazy. And people know nothing about him. They don't care. They look at this is what's legitimized, and they follow it. So these people are very smart.
Yeah. I agree.
They're
And if
actually
you
socially engineering. I mean, they're
absolutely.
completely turning our culture upside down with what they're doing.
Yeah, I think they've already done it personally. But, I mean, for example, Kinsey, if you read Judith Reisman's stuff, I don't know if you've heard her name, but she's pretty much debunked all his work. And Kinsey was a monster, an absolute, he should have been in a jail. He should have been in a rubber room.
Yeah,
so,
but he's revered and respected amongst people who work with sexual stuff. It's crazy.
Yeah,
well, he reminds me of Crowley because Crowley was very perverted and, was basically a pedophile as well. And Kinsey, with all of his, group, their scientific group, were also in that category. And, with the way that our country's going, I keep saying the next big thing after this big movement, we had the feminist movement and we had the gay movement. Next will be the pedophile movement. We're already seeing some of the groups basically saying, hey, this is our sexual preference too. And so they'll go back to Kinsey's work, if that's what you want to call it, which was just a bunch of pedophiles and perverts doing things and documenting it supposedly in a scientific list or manner. There was nothing scientific about it.
Yeah. Scientism, and you're right about Crowley. I was shocked at how much of a sick, perverted person he was when I really got past, his the biographers. You really admired him and looked at the original stuff, So.
All right.
Yeah,
well,
he
we
was
are
really deep.
We are at the point of a break. And we've all talked a lot, so we can give our throats a little rest. And the call-in number, if you'd like to call in and speak with our guest, 714-242-5180, and we'll be right back. And we're back. You're listening to Truth Be Told on Grok Radio with Army Girl for Christ and yours truly. We are speaking tonight with William Ramsey, and we've been talking about occult themes in our culture, predominantly Hollywood. William, could you give out your contact information?
Yeah, I can be reached at my email is occult911@gmail.com, and my website is www.occult911.com, and my books are available on Amazon and Kindle, and I just had my most latest book, Abomination, was published December 1st, 2012, so it's only been out about a month and a half now.
Okay, could you give them some of the titles of some of the other books that they can look for?
I only have two books. So my first one was Prophet of Evil, Aleister Crowley, 9/11 and the New World Order, and it's about Aleister Crowley and how I think he influenced what we call the New World Order and 9/11. And then the other one is Abomination, Devil Worship and Deception in the West Memphis 3 Murders, and that's about the West Memphis 3 and how the public perception is completely fraudulent and false, and that there's a really uncomfortable occult element to these really heinous crimes that took place in 1993.
All right. And now,
go
ahead, Army Girl.
Well, I had a question for you, William. I was just thinking about there's a lot of movies that are being promoted to children right now. Do you know of any of these that have these kinds of messages? Are they trying to do this with the kids' movies? I see one on the list is Madagascar, but are there other ones that maybe they're sneaking this in?
Absolutely. I think that the whole Harry Potter films are heavily skewed towards witchcraft. J.K. Rowling clearly is very knowledgeable about the practice of witchcraft. Harry Potter has all the elements of a witch hero. He's got the lightning bolt on his forehead. His wand is 11 inches long, which is 11 is the prime number of Crowley. There's all kinds of references within even the first book. The Sorcerer's Stone is a play on the occult notion of a philosopher's stone, which is the way to self-perfection. outside of, anything to do with organized religion or Christianity. So, I think that people are being weaned on these occult influenced movies, and they don't really even know what they're being subjected to. So J.K. Rowling is really a change agent of the highest and worst sort. I mean, her films have reached billions of people, and the leaven and the what's going to happen from those books in our generation is not going to be pretty, because you're essentially going to have a whole host of people who've been brought up on these type of supernatural, dark side, romance / Harry Potter stuff, who are going to all think of themselves as little magicians, and what happens when people think that way isn't good.
Well, it's going to be really easy for them to recruit with that mindset. I think the very word Hollywood is from the wood that the wands are made out of, if that's correct.
Right.
So there's a lot of, that very name. And, yeah, it's going to be interesting when the kids get older in the next 10 or 20 years to see what they're going to be like. And also, you're seeing a lot of violence, being promoted. And really, I think, there's a lot of talk about gun control in our country right now. But to me, television itself is the weapon of choice. I mean, this is right in the home. Kids are watching. It's piping right in 24/7 into homes. So to me, it's, but you talk about this, and a lot of people don't even realize that there is a spiritual realm, that there is this dark, what do I want to say, like, area that people get into. And the New Agers at least know that there is a spiritual realm, and they're tapped into it. I don't think it's very similar to the occult. The occult is really more like magic, I believe, and it's really dark. But
yeah, I would agree with that. I think the New Agers do have some occult practices, though. They believe in telepathy and astral travel and all these other things that occultists believe.
Well, it's really interesting because even on the surface, if you're a Christian and just on the surface you look at Harry Potter and you don't know all the symbols and all of that stuff, it's magic, it's, brooms and spells. I mean, just on the surface it's bad. And yet we have churches that were using Harry Potter in their youth groups, in their church services. It just blows my mind how the body of Christ can't recognize even the most basic things. That's scary.
Yeah, and it is scary. And there's little hints within those movies, too, that really dark occultism. I've seen sequences where there's, like, clearly a magical circle on the ground underneath the desks. They're all these, like higher people within the film look like some of the most notorious sorcerers and magicians in history. There's, like, a person who looks like Crowley, another looks like Rasputin. They're sending out some visual signals there, definitely.
Unbelievable. Well, we've got about 10 minutes left. So let's end on, as Christians, what can we do to combat this in our society as well as with our children and our churches, because they don't even know half of this stuff? What do you think is a good way for us as Christians to react to this and kind of be proactive?
Well, I do think it's about awareness. So I think that first you have to kind of understand what the servants of the enemy are up to, and understand their symbols, understand their signals, understand their ideas, what they want to do. I mean, first step is understanding, and the other is to educate, as many people as possible, especially within the Christian church, about some of these things. The fact of the matter is they're like the thin edge of the wedge. They look innocuous, but that's just the beginning, because once you get pulled deeper in, it becomes inevitably darker and darker. So I think it's about awareness and education. And then, as a Christian, I think you just have to reject it. If you know what the witchcraft is and you're aware of it, then you can't, I don't believe in the false model of toleration, especially when people who get really involved in this stuff, eventually it escalates. It gets worse and worse. A lot like this thing that happened in West Memphis was these people escalated and escalated. It started out as rituals, and then they were sacrificing animals, and next thing you know, 3 poor kids were dead. So, it's on the surface, some of these things are horrible. I mean, on the surface, some of these things are innocuous, but it always inevitably leads to darker and darker type criminal behavior.
Agreed.
Well, that's it. I think that we think that we can go into these things, expose ourselves to these images and this unrighteous, kind of information, and it's not. A lot of people don't think it affects your life. That I can separate the two, but if advertising. Advertisers know that the visual image and the repetition part of it obviously works, or they wouldn't be selling products doing that. So with that same idea, if you've got a kid that's already unstable, that they're struggling with their peers, they might have been bullied, they've got home problems. Even Ted Bundy did right before his execution, did a interview with James Dobson from Focus on the Family. And he was very concerned about these images and things that we're seeing on a daily basis. And he said not everybody is going to go out and do these things, but for those that are vulnerable, it just feeds that whole sickness that they have. And then we're seeing on the news a lot of really violent, strange kinds of crimes that are going on, and even Ted Turner has been quoted to say that he knows that the violence on TV and on the movies and such affected the children. He wouldn't even let his own kids watch it.
Yeah, well,
it does affect
that says a lot.
As parents.
Yeah.
Wow, we've got to protect the kids from this. I mean, we think this is innocent. It's part of our culture. Movies and music is so ingrained in our culture, but you're considered really weird and odd and a freak if you come against this stuff and call evil what it is. But we're called to do that. We've got to stand against it somehow, and that seems to be the trend. We're losing the ability to call evil evil. What does it mean anymore? It's slipping into calling evil good and good evil. So. We got to be really aware of the devil's schemes, I think.
Agreed. Definitely.
For sure. And would you know I just lost my entire train of thought?
Well, I think it's the real issue is what can you do? I mean, you kind of just have to say that these are evil things, I mean, a lot of people are very used to it, and they've been inured to it, kind of like the old story about the boiling frog. This is normalization, and unfortunately, it's not part of the ideal culture to have these things and these symbols and these people making these movies, do that, and they should be, like I said, I think it just goes back to what I said earlier. You got to be aware. And you got to educate people so they know what they're seeing. And when you can tie a lot of these things to Aleister Crowley, you can pretty much just wipe them out, because Aleister Crowley was so monstrous and evil that people who have some affinity or association with him just on their face can it's like that's a questionable thing. And you just don't want to give your money to things like that. You kind of just want them to go away. If these people didn't make money off them, they wouldn't be able to put the stuff out that they do.
Right, and if you listen to a lot of the interviews from musicians, people on TV personalities, they'll tell you their kids don't watch television. Their kids don't listen to most of this music. So, they're hypocritical. They spew out all this stuff, and they know what they're putting out is absolute trash, so much that they raise their children to be away from it. I mean, it's
that
crazy.
Tells something right there.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So, well, we are out of time. I want to thank you for being with us tonight. I mean, this was so much information, so much good information. And, we just pray that someone gets woken up and to the reality that we live in through it. And it's just been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for spending the time with us tonight.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's great to be on your show. So,
it's our pleasure.
I'm happy to come back. Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much.
Very honored. God bless you, William. Thank you so much.
God bless you, too. God bless. Have a great night.
Okay, hang on the line 1 second, please.
Sure. Uh-huh.
Okay, thanks.